Is India on the cusp of historic change when it comes to same sex marriages? The Supreme Court is scheduled to start a historic set of hearings on petitions that are asking for same sex marriage to be legalized. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Our focus today is on an issue that we have long advocated for and championed, the right of an individual to have equality when it comes to sexual orientation, gender identification, and by extension, the right to marriage should anyone want it. A clutch of petitions in the Supreme Court are also now arguing that the right to marriage essentially needs to be framed within the fundamental right to life and the right to equality, fundamental rights in our constitution. As I said, the Supreme Court will not just hear, it will live stream these hearings, setting an unprecedented element of transparency to who will say what as these hearings begin. But the Modi government has opposed the legalization of same sex marriages. In fact, in its affidavit, the center has argued that this demand is urban and elitist. The government has further argued that this decision must be left to the legislature and there can be no omnibus decisions from the court. Now, what we forget as we discuss the legality, the articles, the sections of the law, is that this is really about human beings. This is about love. This is about relationships. This is about people who've had to sometimes work hard to bring their families around. This is, in the end, about the human spirit. So, on this special broadcast today, I would like to introduce one set of petitioners who are also partners who are in the Supreme Court. One of them, in fact, is a lawyer petitioner in the court, and their family members, as we look at the human dimension of why the right to marriage is part of the right to love and the right to life. Let's bring up our special panel on this program today. Joining us up first are Utkarsh and Kotia. Utkarsh is a lawyer, in fact, in this case, so it's going to be a big day for him for two reasons, personal and professional. That's why they say the personal is the political. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Also joining us are the parents of Kotia, Dilip and Kumudini ji. Namaskar. और मैं धन्यवाद देना चाहती हूँ क्योंकि बहुत कम पेरेंट्स हैं जो आगे आकर इस मुद्दे पर बोलते हैं, अपने बच्चों के लिए बोलते हैं, और मैं समझ सकती हूँ कि आसान नहीं है एक फैमिली के लिए आके खुले में बात करना। तो मैं धन्यवाद आप दोनों का देना चाहती हूँ कि आपने ये अग्री किया हमारे कार्यक्रम में हिस्सा लेने के लिए। एंड फाइनली उत्कर्ष की बहन, उत्कर्ष सिस्टर अपराजिता इज आल्सो विद अस. सो वी आल्सो वांटेड टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट अ फैमिली गोज थ्रू when it has to sometimes adjust to a different way of thinking. But first, let's talk about the big day that is imminent in the Supreme Court. As I said, Utkarsh Saxena is one of the lawyers in the case. He and his partner Kotia are also petitioners in the case. And Utkarsh, I went through your petition. I understand that because this is sub judice, we can't talk a lot about the law, but I think it's important to talk about the essence of what your petition argues. You argue that the right to marriage is, in fact, a fundamental right because it has to be read alongside the right to life and the right to freedom of expression. And you also talk about how the Supreme Court is actually empowered to issue a writ of mandamus, which basically means to command, the extension of the Special Marriage Act to include people of all sexual orientations. So, Utkarsh, talk a little bit about how this is a case that is huge for you, not just as a lawyer, but also at a personal level.
Yeah, thanks, Barkha. I think on the personal side, it's huge because when we were growing up as kids, as queer kids in 2000s, we didn't think there would be a day when we could publicly file a petition and make our relationships so public. It went from being very private to all over the internet. So it's a bit overwhelming, but still the fact that we can do this is a great sign, tells us that society's come a long way. Legally, I think the two big claims that we are asking for is, one, we are challenging the Special Marriage Act, which is the secular law, and arguing that the whole purpose of the secular law is that those persons who cannot get married within their faith under their personal laws should be accommodated in the Special Marriage Act. In our case, basically fix exactly that. And because of the way in which the constitution is interpreted because of the advance in queer rights with Navtej Johar, where homosexuality was decriminalized, with privacy being identified in the constitution, in Justice Puttaswamy, where I appeared as a lawyer, with transcend as a third gender. The natural next step is to now also extend civil rights and rights of marriage to make us and others full and complete citizens in our constitutional republic. And the way to do that is to interpret the statute in a way that's basically agnostic of a person's gender or sexual orientation. So any two persons, as long as they're above the age of consent, should be allowed to be married. So that's sort of the first big challenge. The second part of the challenge is that we want to ensure that this is not just a privileged project that only those whose families are supportive can come forward and access. And therefore, for this right to be truly available, some provisions of the Special Marriage Act, which we call the notice and objections provisions, under which the marriage officer puts up those parties' photographs and applications on a public notice board and gives 30 days to anyone in the public to come and object to their interest to get married. We believe that actually comes in the way of vulnerable communities, especially the LGBTQ community, to access this right to marriage. And therefore, for this right to be a true and complete right, that's not illusory, that's not only accessed by privileged members of the community, that architecture has to be made more conducive so that there are no restrictions on accessing that right to marriage.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the word privilege, because one of the things the government has argued is that the demand is urban and elitist. Kotia, I want you to respond to that. This entire campaign, this entire bunch of petitions is being framed as something जो अंग्रेजी बोलने वाले, जो upper class है, जो अमीर बच्चे हैं, जो बाहर पढ़ते हैं, urban and elitist. When you hear those two words, do you see your life in those two words? Kotia?
So let me respond to that, with some personal anecdotes. So I think I can maybe agree that there is more voice and more visibility to these issues in urban areas. But consider our life, right? We met 15 years ago in 2008. And for the first 6-7 years, we told no one about our relationship. Now, one way to interpret that would be that we don't exist. But I think that would be the wrong interpretation. I think we didn't feel confident. We were very fearful of coming out, for a whole host of reasons. For professional reasons, we weren't sure which way our family, extended family would react. Even friends. I mean, we didn't come out to even friends till 6 years into our relationship. So I think we are dealing with something where it's unlike other minorities, whether it is gender, caste, or religion, where it is public from birth that what your identity is. I think here a lot of people hide their true identity, and with that hiding comes a lot of pain, comes a lot of psychological trauma, and precisely because of that hiding, I don't think we can link visibility to whether that thing exists or not. I think this is a universal phenomena. It exists in cities, it exists in villages, it exists in India, it exists outside India. 20 years ago, perhaps people would make the argument that this is not an Indian thing, and they still make the argument that this is only a Western thing. Now, at least you're acknowledging that this is happening in Indian cities.
I'm reminded, because I'm older than certainly both of you. I'm reminded of the time that homosexuality was still a crime in India, and we were among those as journalists, as citizens, who would sort of rally against this. And the first time this came to the Supreme Court, the same argument was made that this impacts a minority. There's no basis, of course, to say this. There's no basis to make this argument. There's no data point. There's no survey you can refer to. So it's strange to actually hear the same argument again. But Kotia, before your parents are on the program, what I want to ask you is, you said that you and Utkarsh couldn't talk about this for several years, right? Living in secret, what kind of feeling does that evoke? Does it evoke guilt? Does it evoke shame, even though your rational mind is telling you that there's nothing to be ashamed of? I want you to speak a little bit about what you went through. And when was the first time that you, Kotia, and then I'll ask Utkarsh the same question because his sister's here. When was the first time that you could tell your parents, and how did they react at first? Kotia?
So I think it was... I think the one thing that I remember about being in sort of hiding or not telling anyone was that we just really wanted people to be happy for us. It's not easy to find a partner who you think is there for life. And I think it was, whenever we would hang out with our friends, we'd hang out as best friends, not as partners. And in fact, the
Yeah.
most public that we've ever obviously gone with this is the petition. So when we were in Delhi in December last year, that I think was the first time that we were truly hanging out with anyone and everyone as a couple. And that gave me so much happiness. I made sure I met everyone. I made sure that I really soaked that in. But I think we took our time with telling people, not only because we thought the reaction would necessarily be adverse. I think we ourselves wanted to just be in a comfortable, confident position, with respect to our careers. We just, if at all there is a backlash, and not to say that people made us feel that there will be a backlash, but if at all 1% chance there is a backlash, we just wanted to make sure that we're standing on firm footing with everything else in our life. And
Sure.
so I think we waited for a long time. I told my parents, I think in 2020, and they were they were very happy for us. In fact, the first thing my father told me was, why did you tell Utkarsh's parents first? You should have told us same time as you told them. So of course this was all in my head, this fear, this apprehension.
Yeah.
And I think it helped the fact that we really have grown up together. I mean, we met when I was 18, Utkarsh was 20. This was in Hansraj College in Delhi University. And we've just been we've been a part of each other's lives. He would come over a lot. I would go to his place. I know his parents very well. His parents know me very well. So for them, it wasn't, some random man that I am with.
Yeah.
For them, it was Utkarsh, who they knew very well.
But let me actually bring your parents in, and then I'll come to Utkarsh and his sister Prajita. Dilip and Kumudini ji, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी कि जब कोटिया ने आपको बताया कि one, I am gay, and Utkarsh is not my best friend, he is actually my boyfriend or my partner, तो आप इनिशियली अनकंफर्टेबल थे कि आपको पहले से ही एक इंस्टिंक्ट थी कि शायद ऐसा ही कुछ है? इट्स नॉट इजी फॉर जनरेशंस टू एक्सेप्ट चेंजेस दैट कम विद अदर जनरेशंस, तो कोई जजमेंट भी नहीं है अगर शुरू में थोड़ा सा एडजस्टमेंट का टाइम की जरूरत पड़ी? अब मैं दिलीप जी से शुरू करूंगी. दिलीप जी, आप बताइए.
इनफैक्ट व्हेन अनन्या talked to us about this, so I was little bit upset as to what he is saying. I could not understand the meaning of what he told me. So when I came to know the thing, then the first question which came in my mind was, so it's a natural thing. Why did not you tell all these things, all this to us earlier? So since I know about the subject a little bit, and it's quite a natural thing. So my reaction was, in fact, not that what you are doing, but why did not you tell it to us earlier?
And Kumudini, did you feel the same, or did you feel upset also in the way that your husband did कि भाई हमें पहले क्यों नहीं बताया? आप upset थी? आपको पहले से एक instinct थी कि ऐसा ही है?
नहीं, ऐसा तो नहीं था कि इंस्टिंक्ट थी कि ऐसा ही है, लेकिन ये था कि इन दोनों की बॉन्डिंग बहुत ही ज्यादा शुरू से रही है, और जब से ये लोग कॉलेज में साथ आए हैं तब से इनका था. तो जब अनन्या ने बताया तो मेरे को तो अच्छा ही लगा, और मेरे को लगा कि हाँ, उत्कर्ष को हम इतना समय से जानते हैं, इससे अच्छा और क्या हो सकता है. और मैंने उससे यही कहा, बेटा इतने साल आप इतने टेंशन में क्यों रहे? आपको बात करना चाहिए था, बता देना चाहिए था बेटा कि हम लोगों के लिए एक्सेप्टेबल है उत्कर्ष, तो उत्कर्ष से अच्छा लड़का हम लोग कहाँ और देख सकते हैं. इन दोनों की बॉन्डिंग इतनी अच्छी है, अंडरस्टैंडिंग इतनी अच्छी है, और उत्कर्ष को हमने छुटपन से घर में हर हालत में देखा है. दोनों जने साथ बड़े हुए हैं, साथ पले हैं, एक ही घर में. यहाँ ये रहता था, वहाँ वो अनन्या उत्कर्ष के यहाँ जाता था, वहाँ पे उसके पेरेंट्स इतने सपोर्टिव थे. तो कहीं ऐसा लगा नहीं कि मतलब ये कोई जो है ये क्यों हो रहा है, क्या हो रहा है. बस एक यही था कि तुमने इतने साल इतनी टेंशन क्यों बिताई अपने सर में लेकर के. बता देते पहले तो शायद तुम और खुश अच्छे से आसानी से रह सकते.
I would like to add one thing, if you
जी.
In fact, on the same day, I talked to the father of Utkarsh also, and just to know about whether he knows it or not. So he also came to know more or less at the same time. So, but I was so happy to know that Utkarsh father and Utkarsh mother lives in US. So they were equally happy and they were with us. So uh, both sides, both parents uh, are taking it in a very normal manner and in a happy manner. It also gives me a great, I mean, satisfaction. And Aparajita sister, Utkar's sister, she is already here.
Yes, I'm going to talk to her in a minute, but she's closer to our age, so her response would not sort of fill me with the kind of warm feeling that yours does. क्योंकि दिलीप और कुमुदनी जी, वो हमारी जो समाज है ना, उसमें सबसे पहले बहुत से पेरेंट्स हैं, वो कहते हैं भाई लोग क्या कहेंगे, लोग क्या कहेंगे। ठीक है, हमारे घर में एक डोंट डोंट आस्क डोंट टेल पॉलिसी भी होती है कि भाई ठीक है, चार दीवारों के बीच में हम जानते हैं, किसी और को मत बोलना। कभी आप दोनों में से किसी ने सोचा कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, दिलीप एंड कुमुदिनी जी?
कभी नहीं आया दिमाग में कभी नहीं। उन लोगों की खुशी के लिए मतलब ये चीज तो बहुत दूर की बात है।
देखिए, लोग तो नेचुरली हमारी सोसाइटी जो इस समय है, इस स्टेज में है, ठीक है, मॉडर्निटी की तरफ आई है, बहुत सारे प्रोग्रेसिव स्टेप्स हुए हैं, बट स्टिल इट्स ए लॉन्ग वे टू गो। तो बट द क्वेश्चन इज, आई मीन, वी हैव ए फैमिली, वी हैव आवर सन एंड डॉटर, वी हैव आवर लाइफ। सो to a very limited extent only we will bother for others view on that, others reaction on that. So long as Utkarsh and Ananya are happy, we don't want any other thing.
Hurrah for both of you, 3 cheers. But एक सवाल और before I go to Aprajita and back to Utkarsh. गवर्नमेंट ने कहा है ये elitist है, ये urban है. I think it would help our audience to understand a little bit about the kind of background. You know, people don't want to see this as something that is across classes, Dilip ji. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourselves, you know, you're in Dehradun, I know, but sort of your professional background, because I think it's also important for people to understand this is across backgrounds, across classes, across types. Dilip ji, tell us a little bit about your family. What did you do? What did, you know, tell us about your family. Or Kumudini ji.
Okay. Uh, we have been in educated family. My father was in teaching profession, and my brother and others were also in good government jobs. And in 1981, I entered into the civil services. I am a retired IAS officer. So I was allotted to UP cadre, then later on I shifted to Uttarakhand cadre. So I have seen villages also, I have seen urban areas also, I have seen government of India, state government. So I can say with some confidence that I'm having a good exposure. Visited many countries abroad too. So that way, I mean, in your preface and Utkarsh and Ananya, they have already mentioned in detail about freedom, about equality, about fundamental rights, and about, I mean, and more. I would like to add that when a thing is natural, why should not we try to convince the society that this has been there?
You know, but not all families, Utkarsh, go through such a smooth journey as you and Kotya seem to have gone through. Can you talk a little bit about, before the sheer relief of having your families know and welcome it, what it felt like for you to live with this as a secret? We heard from Kotya, but you know, I've been talking to other petitioners. They've spoken about how घर नहीं मिलता, renting is difficult, those who have foreign partners who are foreign citizens, there are people who got married abroad and they cease to be spouses once they reach India. So talk a little bit about that, Utkarsh, before I bring in your sister.
I look at my life as like a pre-courtier phase and a post-courtier phase. I think the fact that I was growing up single and queer, especially as a kid in India, my father was in the military, so I grew up in a pretty hypermasculine setting. I went to an all-boys school. I was a criminal lawyer, which is also a slightly hypermasculine space. And it was incredibly depressing. We were very despondent. I didn't think there would be any happiness in my life. I felt like someone had made a giant mistake, made the world a certain way and made me the other way. And I always wondered, why was I working hard? I was a good student, but I didn't see the point of studying because it just felt so pointless, because there was so much phobia and mockery and ridicule and hate around me. And I was just constantly fearing abandonment. My childhood was a lot about the day people find out about who I am, they're going to abandon me and leave me. And that's, for a 13, 14-year-old to go through when you're that fragile, is debilitating. It consumes you. It's depressing. There was no language around mental health at the time, but I was probably depressed, but I had no one to go to and I was by myself. So those years were very painful and very difficult. And then I think the fact that I met Kotia, and I was lucky I met him when I was so young and we've been together for 20 years, just became a kind of support system for me, that those anxieties went away a little bit. I felt like even if the world was never with us, at least I would have Kotia with me. And yes, there were practical difficulties. We always wondered, would we ever be able to start a family? We both want to live in India. Our parents come from public service backgrounds, never aspired to live outside the country. I really want to be a dad and really want a child. And at some level, both of us talked it out of our system, saying, let's forget about this because this is not in our destiny. And just how do we live together, tenancy, like the usual stuff. But just fortunately, because I think I had this relationship, it became a little easier to deal with. I don't know people who are single and queer. I don't know how they do it. It's so
and how did how did your parents respond, coming from what you call a hypermasculine sort of conditioning, the forge? Was it as smooth for you as it was for Kotia?
To be fair, I mean, I took my time. So I was also observing changes in their views. I think if I came out as a kid, it would have been much more difficult. I took my time. I think I told my dad in like 2018, my mom and my sis in 2016 and 15, and they were all very supportive. My sister actually had figured it out before, and she'll tell you, because she's more precautious like that. But I think for me, as you mentioned, the lo kya kahenge phenomena, it happened in our family a little bit. I think I had two coming outs. The first was when they found out about me. And the second was late last year when we were filing the petitions, when there was a little bit of, oh, now we have to deal with our social networks. We have to deal with what will people say in the forge, in other circles. And there was a conversation around it, a sort of healthy conversation. There's also concerns about, are we going to be in danger? This is so public. Is the media going to harass us? So there was all of that happening. But fortunately, we talked about it and they were on board. And so I do count myself as one of the lucky ones whose family has been quite supportive throughout.
I want to bring in your sister at this point, Aprajita. I think Utkarsh makes a very important point. Much has changed, how parents would react today. It's also a consequence of years of advocacy, years and years and years of advocacy. And by the way, not just by the LGBTQ community, but also by the heterosexual community. There are many people who have just stood up for the right to love. What did you watch happening within your family as it became evident that Utkarsh, even before he came out, he says you had a sense of it? How did this play out in your family and in your extended family, or among your neighbors or in the neighborhood? Sometimes parents will always love their kids, but what about the everybody else that comes with the tabbar, as they say in Punjabi? Aprajita.
Yeah, so I think extended family only found out when Utkarsh decided to go public late last year. And I was actually surprised by their reaction, because it was just very heartwarming. And, they were like, maybe we don't understand all of this. Also, they acknowledged that, but they were like, they loved Utkarsh for who he is. And they were like, we just want you to be happy. So they were really operating from a space of love. And I think that was inspiring in itself for me, to watch, like you were mentioning, I'm more closer to this age. So it's obviously easier for me to, make sense of all of this. But for them, even though they can't make sense of it, they're like, yes, we're on board. We want your happiness. So that was really interesting. Of course, within my family, I think I knew first. I figured it out earlier. So when I found out, I was like, this was, way back in 2009, I think. And when I found out, I I think my first reaction was that, okay, this is unusual for sure. Like, I don't know, you don't come across this in your day to day. But I think I did, at that point, it did feel a sense of sadness that because I was exposed to, my brother struggling in his own reality alone. And I think that for me was, uh, I guess it was more from a sibling point of view. I was just focused on that he's struggling and I can't confront him. And I know this and he's, dealing with this. So just a deep sense of sadness of what now life might look like. And as Utkarsh mentioned earlier, and he was always like a good student. Everyone thought Utkarsh has it together. So, but I suddenly found out that behind the scenes, it's really not so easy at all. So I think that's been my experience. Yeah.
And is your family comfortable with the idea of him petitioning the court and wanting to be married, wanting to be a father? Like, I think what's happening here is homosexuality was decriminalized and basically the community is being told, okay, bus, right? So I'm just wondering how you all have, you must have had conversations about it at family dinners, when nobody else is listening, watching there. And I just want to say one thing, like, I feel no judgment of families that have taken their time to come around, because it's not as if heterosexual kids find it so easy to talk about their relationships or their love life or their sex life with their parents. So it's not a given that your parents are just going to automatically be cool about everything you discuss with them. Aprajita?
Right. I think so. Yeah, I think as Utkarsh briefly touched upon it, there was this sort of reservation a little bit that, okay, now that, you'll go public, how will that play out? And a sense of like, are you safe, firstly, in this decision making? Like sometimes we kind of get selfish in that aspect, like, okay, my son should be safe. Like, I get it, you want to advocate and, this is important, but be very careful. So those things were coming up. And, I think the continuous dialogue helped. And I saw that change. Like Utkarsh really took it upon himself to like have that talk and even be open to all sorts of emotions coming out. Like you said, he was really like accepting of, let's talk about it and let's get through it together. If there is anything, even a small doubt that you're having around this. So I think just giving us the space when he didn't need to, like he's dealing with, we ideally should have been able to give him that space. But so taking shared responsibility and acknowledging that everyone has feelings around this and together trying to figure it out. Yeah.
So Utkarsh and Kotya, do you agree with what I just said, that you can't expect always an automatic embrace? That's ideal. That's how it should be. But people take their time, right? So did it annoy you that you had to explain yourself, or were you comfortable having that dialogue because you yourself maybe had gone through some amount of, I don't know, wrestling with your mind, your brain, your heart, your sexuality? Utkarsh?
Yeah, I think as I said, I was so scared of abandonment that in those moments, the fact that there was even caveated acceptance with some questions, honestly, was not annoying. I was very happy to explain it. And I think for all of us, even for queer people, it's a learning. You're figuring things out about yourself and you're trying to understand who you are and why you are the way you are. So if for myself, there was a learning process, most certainly for families who don't go through this internally, there will be a learning process, and it requires patience. It takes a toll on you. But I think it's because we are, I think, as you mentioned earlier, we're standing on shoulders of giants. This movement has been going on for ages. The NAS Foundation has been working tirelessly on the ground with communities, that this little bit that we do in our homes feels so small compared to sort of the larger movement, that it's just, you have to do it. And it's overcompensated by the love that follows, by the way, because everything else that's come after that has been very heartwarming.
Yeah, I just I have a legal question to you, and then we'll take closing comments. And the legal question is this: one, the center, we discussed urban and elitist, but they're also saying let this be the legislature's domain. That completely is different from the essence of your petition, which actually says this can be done by the court by simply issuing a writ of mandamus. They're saying no. If anyone's going to make this law, it's going to have to be the legislature. The court can't step into our space. This is something you'll have to argue as the hearings begin. So what would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, every time there's a civil rights case, this argument comes up that policy and law has to be made by the parliament and not by the court. But the thing is, the court is not actually making a law. The law already exists. The government has decided to pass a law called the Special Marriage Act. The only challenge that we are making is that it extends some rights to some groups of people and not to others. And is that constitutionally valid? So we are scrutinizing an existing law that's already been passed and saying that for it to be harmonious with the constitution, this right cannot be selectively granted to some people or the other, which is why for it to be constitutionally valid, it needs to be read in a way that's neutral of gender or sexual orientation. So there's no lawmaking involved. It's interpreting an existing law. And that's how civil rights actions works. And honestly, I think this...
but there are affiliated laws that would have to change, right? Divorce, adoption, surrogacy. I mean, which, there are many things that will have to change alongside.
All of which marriage is a prerequisite. So there are a few parts before the court, right? It could say we will only limit this case to marriage and then decide other laws in other litigations. It could say that those laws, because they also have marriage as a prerequisite, and it shouldn't matter whether they're same-sex couple or straight couples, whether they have the rights to inheritance or property or bank accounts, all of those should naturally flow. Or it may say that in some countries it went this way, that we will identify this for marriage and maybe pass directions to the legislature to make accommodations in the other law. So there are a host of options available before the court. But just because the work ahead for the bundle of rights and related laws is difficult doesn't mean that you don't first deal with the most important fundamental right here, which is the right to marriage. Sometimes civil rights work is messy. A lot of this happened with the feminist movement. A lot of times people said, wait, how do you accommodate women here? The law is this, it's awkward, but that doesn't matter. With progress in civil reforms, that's the job of the courts and the parliament, and we'll figure a way out.
Okay. Koti, I want to give your parents the last word, but to anyone who might say, why marriage? Even heterosexuals are questioning the institution. It's an institution that is questioned for patriarchy, for whether it works. Generationally, people find it tough. You guys have been together for 20 years. That in itself is unusual. So many people sort of think that relationships have a shelf life. Why is the right to marriage? Why do you want to be married to Utkarsh? What would you say, Kotia?
So together for 15 years, I think he misspoke.
Oh, sorry,
earlier.
15. Okay,
Seems
15
like but I think there's a simple equation. I mean, we found each other for life. I think we love each other. There's lifetime commitment, and that equals marriage. In my head, maybe because of the books I've read, maybe because of what I've seen on TV, maybe because how I've observed my family and my friends' families. So I think, of course, there are lots of financial reasons and practical reasons, like co-owning property, starting a family later on. But even if you put all of that aside, which is all very important, I think at a very emotional level, I do want to get married because I associate marriage. I've been to friends' weddings and I want to have a wedding of my own with Utkarsh. But I completely understand that some people don't think that this is for them, and that's totally okay with what we're asking as well. So it's just about extending that choice to us, but of course not forcing that this is the right way to live on anybody else.
If straight people have the choice to turn down marriage, maybe queer people should also have the choice to turn down marriage, but at least we should have the choice.
Fair enough. I just wanted to raise that because I hear so many people ask that, and that's why I wanted to ask it, not because I needed reconvincing. I want to just give the last word to Dilip and Kumudini. Kumudini ji, मैं आपको last word देना चाहती हूँ कि जो parents आप लोगों की जैसे नहीं हैं, जो अपने बच्चों को नहीं एक्सेप्ट करते, जो रेजिस्ट करते हैं, जो गुस्सा होते हैं, जिनको बहुत दुख होता है, उनको आप क्या कहेंगी आज, कुमुदिनी जी?
मेरी उनसे यही है रिक्वेस्ट, यही कहना है कि प्लीज आप अपने बच्चों को देखिए, उनके इमोशंस को देखिए. रिलेशनशिप अगर अच्छी है, जेन्युइन है, एक दूसरे के प्रति उनका समर्पण है, तो आप क्यों इस चीज को नहीं मानते हैं? आपको मानना चाहिए.
थैंक यू. आप जितना उसको सिंपली बताती हैं उतना ही सिंपल द होल कॉम्प्लेक्स आर्गुमेंट कैन एक्चुअली बी ब्रॉट डाउन जस्ट टू दैट वन फैक्ट. And I thank you for saying that. Thank you, Dilip ji and Kumudini ji, to Utkarsh and to Namaste, and thank you to Utkarsh and to Kotia for fighting the good fight, for Aprajita for standing by your brother. And whichever way you look at it, we're actually on the cusp of something historic. We are going to have the Supreme Court live stream the hearings on why same-sex marriage should not be legalized. The center is opposing it, but let's also remember that the Chief Justice himself, who delivered that historic right to privacy judgment, is big on personal liberty, and I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. So good luck, guys, and thank you very much. And to our audience, thanks as ever for watching. See you soon. We started Mojo right here in this basement. Just 4 people, 4. And now we're about to hit our first 1 million subscribers. So this is to say thank you to all of you for your support, for your respect, and for your encouragement. We've always gone to where the story is. During the pandemic, when television's big anchors were hunkered down in their studios or at their homes, we hit the road. We traveled from Delhi to Kerala, covering 30,000 kilometers in a small car, reporting from inside ICUs and inside slum tenements. Whether it's flash floods or war zones, we've always put our boots on the ground. In fact, we're just back from Punjab, tailing the Khalistani fugitive Amritpal Singh. And through all of this, we have always put you, the people, first. In an age of partisan polarized media where most journalists are either chamcha ya morcha, we believe the story is sacred and the truth of the story is what matters. And now as we get ready for the next step, we need your help. Become a Mojo member and get first access to all our big interviews. Get a chance to ask our newsmakers questions. Get a chance to write and report for us for both our website and our channels. And also, interact with me and my colleagues directly through AMA sessions. Literally, ask me anything. Click on the join now right next to the subscribe button, and yes, also subscribe if you haven't yet, and become a Mojo member for just 159 rupees a month. Hope to see lots of you in our community. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.